So I wrote a book, and I need to tell you something that might sound completely backwards coming from an author. But this book was written specifically for people who don't finish books. I know that kind of sounds ridiculous, but let's talk about it.
Yo. Yo. Yes.
Yo, it's Alyece, say it right, no cap. ADHD CEO, yeah, we run this track. Systems that slap, brains built different. We make sales in our sleep, yeah, the hustle's efficient. This ain't fluff, nah, this is strategy raw for the ADHD. Minds breaking every old law. Hit subscribe, don't miss a single show. We're running on dopamine, let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room here. If you have ADHD, you probably have a graveyard of unfinished books sitting on your nightstand, in your Kindle, in your Audible account, on your shelf, and, books you were so excited about, books you bought at 2 a.m. because they promised to change your life, books that maybe someone recommended and you started with enthusiasm. And way into chapter 1, it was like, something else, right? You got distracted or just wasn't as exciting as it was actually buying it. And you never finished it. And here's the thing, it's not because you're lazy. I say that all the time, but we tend to internalize that like this is some sort of laziness. And it's not usually because you have lack of discipline. It's not even because you don't want to learn to grow. If anything, people with ADHD are lifelong learners. And I'm going to put my little medical disclaimer in here. Obviously, I'm not a medical provider. This is from my experience and from what I've studied. So talk to your doctor if you're unsure. But it's usually because those books weren't written for your brain and they don't keep the excitement and the dopamine the entire time you're reading. Most books, especially self-help books, productivity books, they're written in a way that almost punishes our brain. Super long chapters that are not storytelling. There's nothing keeping you engaged, or it's really dense paragraphs. A lot of times it's like abstract concepts with no immediate application or a way for you to actually take what you're learning and put it into real life. And they expect for you to kind of sit still and focus and absorb information in the way that most people do, right? Most neurotypical brains do. But what happens when you can't do that? You skim it, you skip around, you put it down, you never pick it back up. Maybe you're like me, you flip to the back and you're like, let me just find out how it ends so I can feel a little bit better, right? You feel like you failed again. So when I sat down to write Flow-First Thinking, I had one non-negotiable rule. I wanted this book to be one that would actually get finished by most people who read it or the people who needed it the most. And so when designing this book, I thought about how I like to read. I do like some things that break up text. I like shorter sentences and I like stories. I will continue to read if a story is keeping me engaged. I did not want to write it for, the brain I wish I had or the, psychiatry gurus or productivity gurus that will tell you, you should have more discipline to sit still and read. I wanted to write it for like this beautifully chaotic, brilliantly wired brain that you actually have. And so I want to talk about this today because obviously the book's on pre-sale and I'm really excited and I want to share it with you. But why we struggle to actually finish tasks and what that means. But first, let me back up and tell you why I wrote the book in the first place. Because writing a book, and this is actually my second book published on my own. I was in a collab book a couple years ago. Asking me to sit down and write this book is kind of like asking me to run a marathon while juggling. All right. It's one of those like long-term projects that requires so much focus and delayed gratification and the ability to show up even when I'm just not motivated. There's no momentum. And there's a lot of ways that I was able to finish this book. If you've ever listened to any of my podcasts, listened to me on anyone else's podcast, done any training with me, been in my community at all, I love voice memos. So for me, that was one of the easiest ways was to really voice out my chapters and then transcribe it, get that on my computer, and then edit and tweak and edit and tweak. And so no, did I have to sit there with a pen and paper and a pad and, sit there and jot things down for hours? Absolutely not. And I did do a mind map, which I absolutely love. And if you saw the carousel I did on Instagram recently, voice pen is like hands down one of my favorite apps. I 10 out of 10 recommend it. And they just launched a mind map inside that app. So I was able to like voice pen my thoughts of what this outline would be. Because if you didn't watch the TED Talk, definitely do that. I'll have all that in the show notes for you. But the TED Talk was kind of the appetizer, and the book is the full course menu, right? And this is how I have operated my framework for the last at least year and a half. And it was all built from years of, me growing up neurodivergent, me finding out Caden had autism and really leaning into my own neurodivergency. Before I found out my son had autism, it was very much like, well, I'm just ADHD. That's just how it is. I didn't really want to learn more about how to be better with it or how to work better with it. It was just like, this is just my life. Everything's always going to be harder for me. But when my child got into the picture and I found out he was neurodivergent and in a whole different way. And I feel bad. I'll say this. I feel like a shit mom sometimes because my oldest is also ADHD. We obviously are both verbal and things were harder, but we didn't have the same level of challenges as Caden had with his nonverbal autism and more stimming and more sensory overload and all of those things. So apologies to my oldest son. And I've said this to him 100 times, but when he was diagnosed, it was very much like, well, son, sorry, things are just going to be harder. It's going to be harder for you to focus. And then when going through the challenges with Caden of a child who could not actually speak to me and tell me what he needed, and just it was a whole different world. That's when I really started to learn more about not only how the brain works and processes and how we work and we process, but how to work with it, right? Because I always wanted to make things easier for my children. As a mother, that's just what we want to do. I did try to make things easier for my oldest. Obviously we did therapies and things like that with his or his ADHD. And, I always looked for ways to make things simpler or explain things simpler or make things visual for him. But like I said, it was just a different level of challenge when it came to my middle child. And that's when I really started to learn. And now I know better as a mom. And my husband says all the time, "I'm so tired of you diagnosing me," because he'll say, "It's kind of odd I do this, it's odd I do that." And I'm like, "Well, let me tell you why." But all of that being said, when I did this TED Talk, I knew I wanted it to be a book, and I had to find ways for me to finish this book. I'm not kidding. I had to find ways, and dopamine and a deadline are the best ways to operate. So, of course, I put it out there on social media before I even started. This book is coming end of 2025. That did not happen. We had some challenges, and I don't know who I thought I was trying to finish this book during the holidays. It just didn't happen. It was probably for the best because if it would have been rushed, it wouldn't have been done the way I wanted it to be done. And as an ADHD person with somewhat perfectionism, I said, you know what, we're going to do February. And here we are. But I needed a deadline. If I wouldn't have set it on the calendar, if I wouldn't have held myself accountable, public accountability works so well for me because I have this like real fear of being embarrassed that I said I was going to do something and I didn't. So very often I will put things online or on, so I'm doing this and I haven't even started it. And that's how I hold myself accountable because I highly doubt anybody's ever going to go back through my Facebook post and be like, you said you were doing this and you didn't, but I have the fear that they will. And so that is one way I hold myself accountable, but probably not healthy, but that's how it works for me. With that being said, I had to find ways to finish this book, right? Writing. I had to find ways to finish writing it. And then as the chronic overachiever that I have always been, I kept getting more. I want to put more resources and a master class to go with it and templates that they can have and images in the book so they can see it visually. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. But there were so many times, I'm not kidding, I wanted to quit. So many times I also second guessed myself and was like, who am I to write this book? I'd already published a damn book earlier last year and I still doubted myself because I was like, I can barely finish my to-do list some days. And here I am telling people how to finish their to-do list. But here's the thing. At no point in time in this book will I ever tell you I'm perfect or that I've cracked the code. Okay. What I can tell you is that I now understand when I have those doubts of like, hey, I can't even, who am I to do this? I know that is either my fear or my boredom, period. And I can move right past it. I no longer wake up every day like just doubting myself and having guilt. I usually wake up excited with momentum and I can't wait to get my computer out to work. And that's exactly why I had to finish this book. I had to. And there is probably no one on this planet that will tell you I am not a productive person. If anything, they're going to be like, I don't know if she even sleeps. I get things done. And because I kept meeting entrepreneurs that were brilliant and talented and creative who were convinced they were broken, I knew this had to get out there. People who had been told their entire lives that they needed to fix themselves, manage themselves better, focus more, try harder. And I just kept watching people with this incredible potential burnout trying to force themselves to do things in a certain way just because that's how it's always been done. And when writing this book and outlining it, kind of going through the motions, I knew I wanted a chapter about, why I wrote this book and why this was important. I think it's really important that you understand my experience, because if you can see yourself in my experiences, then you will understand that this can also work for you. I also knew I wanted a chapter a little bit around how all of this started, like walking through my childhood. So, yes, you're going to learn a little bit about my story in the book and how I perceived situations that happened to me as a child, right? Or how other people perceived me speaking up in class, asking questions that I was genuinely curious about and being almost reprimanded a lot of times as if I was questioning authority. And I'm fearful because my daughter is so much like me in that way she's gonna just walk right into that. But now I'm educated enough to advocate on that. And so when really outlining the book, I had to go back through my own experiences, which was really rough. I talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but my main priority was we don't need more advice on how to be less ADHD. We don't. We need a framework that shows us how to build our life and our business and function in a way that we use it to our advantage and not in spite of it. And, I'm not going to go all the way back through my flow framework in this episode. You can watch the TED Talk. I've done a whole episode on it. But if you watch that, you know, you really saw that I walk you through understanding when your brain is actually online, when you have energy, when you can focus. And the revolutionary part here is we build a schedule around those times. You can build a schedule around those times. It might take some bravery. It might take you being willing to make a career change, make some schedule changes, saying no to things, but it's possible. And when you really hone in on this and you really understand the problem has never been you. It's just been the status quo and how you've done things because that's how we were supposed to do them. You'll understand that you can tackle tasks you've been avoiding for months. You can do the boring things and get them finished, right? You can build simple, sustainable systems. Think like piles, not files, right? If you're like me, you have piles everywhere. They're like visual reminders of all the things you need to do. Okay. And you'll learn how to actually structure your business operations and your kids' schedules and your family's schedules so that you're doing your most important work when your brain is at its best, because that's what will build confidence in you. Okay. Every single concept from this book comes from working with other entrepreneurs, my own doctors, my own therapists. These aren't strategies I read in some textbook. All right. They're strategies that were born from like 2 a.m. panic attacks, from all the missed deadlines, from the absolute chaos of trying to force myself to be normal. And I've tested every single one of these in my own business. I've refined them with my students, with my kids. I've watched them transform businesses that were barely surviving into one of confidence and sustainability and profitable operations. Okay. And I put it all the messy truth, all the practical systems, all the real talk about what it's actually like to be an ADHDpreneur into this book. And I have also, because this was a question that came up, I did put in this book strategies for ADHD professionals as well. So I realize not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, but I have worked with professionals that work in an office setting or a corporate setting. And so when I give tactics in this book, I also include tactics for those people. So this is how I would do it if you're an entrepreneur. This is how I would do it if you're a professional. And you will find one thing I know about the ADHD brain is sometimes you need to experience something, not just read about it. And so that's exactly why if you grab Flow First during the presale, I'll put the link in the show notes for you. You're getting immediate access to the FLOW-First Masterclass. Okay. And when I say immediate, you can book your time spot immediately. It's complimentary, it's free. It's not going to be a webinar. It's where you're going to sit and watch. It's not a webinar where you're going to sit and watch me talk for an hour. Okay. This is a workshop, hands on, do it with me type session. We're going to build your flow framework together. Okay, we're going to actually map out your spark times. We're going to identify your boring tasks you've been avoiding, create your linking strategy. We're going to organize your, and we're going to design your ideal week based on your real energy patterns. And by the end of the masterclass, you won't just understand the flow framework. You'll have yours built and ready to implement. Okay, it's not something we need to overcome or manage into submission. It's untapped potential. Your ability to hyper focus is a superpower when it's directed at the right things at the right time. Your pattern recognition, that's why you see opportunities other people miss. Your ability to think in multiple directions at once, that's innovative. Okay, the problem has never been your brain. The problem has been trying to force your brain into these systems and the status quo. All right. This book is your permission slip to stop trying to be someone you're not, to build your life in a way that works the way you work, and to finally start seeing something, to finally finish something you start because it's designed for finishing, not just for starting. All right. So if you are sitting there with a list of unfinished books, unfinished courses, unfinished projects, this one is for you. Okay. If you've ever felt like you're the problem because you can't focus better or be more consistent, this one's for you. Definitely check out the show notes. Grab it while it's on pre-sale. It gets you access to all the bonuses. And here is my promise to you. You're going to finish this one because I built it for you to finish it. As always, if you got any value out of this episode at all, please leave it a review. It's the best compliment you can give. Check out the show notes for all the links. Take a screenshot if you listen to this, throw it in the stories and tag me. Let me know that you grabbed yours when you grab it. Take a screenshot, tag me on IG at socially.awesome. Till next time, make it simple, make it social, and make it awesome.